All right, welcome everyone. Today we are diving deep into chronic cough in adults. Now, if you're a pharmacist, you already know this is something you see all the time in practice. But it's also a really critical topic to have mastered for your exams. So we're going to break it all down, focusing on that high yield info you absolutely need to know.
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the absolute basics. What even is a chronic cough? Then we'll walk through how to investigate and diagnose it properly. After that, we'll cover the main treatment strategies, tackle what to do when a cough just won't go away, touch on special groups like pregnancy, and we'll wrap it all up with some key therapeutic pearls that are perfect for exam.
Okay, first things first. Before we can treat anything, we need a really solid definition. So, what's the dividing line? What actually makes a cough chronic in the eyes of a clinician?
And here it is. 8 weeks. That is the magic number. A cough that lasts less than 3 weeks, that's acute, usually from an infection. Between 3 and 8 weeks, we call that subacute. But our entire focus today is on those stubborn coughs that hang around for longer than 8 weeks.
Now, this is probably one of the most important slides we'll look at. For the right patient, we're talking a non-smoker, someone with a normal chest x-ray, and not taking an ACE inhibitor, the cause of their chronic cough almost always comes down to one of these 4 conditions. This is the absolute cornerstone of our entire diagnostic approach. But what happens when it's not one of the big 4? Well, sometimes, even after you've done all the tests and tried the standard treatments, the cough just sticks around. This is what we call unexplained chronic cough, or UCC. It's not a huge percentage of cases, but it's a significant one, and it requires a totally different strategy.
Okay, before we even think about starting empiric therapy, we have to stop and screen for these red flags. This is absolutely critical. If you see any of these, like coughing up blood, a long smoking history with a new cough, or systemic symptoms like weight loss, that changes everything. You have to pause the standard approach and dig deeper to rule out something more serious, like cancer. This brings us to what we're actually trying to accomplish. And let me be clear, it is not just about grabbing a random cough suppressant. Our number one goal is to find and treat the specific cause. That's the only way to actually cure the problem, prevent nasty complications, and make sure we haven't missed something much more sinister. So, how do we put all this together? We can't just take shots in the dark. We need a structured, evidence-based framework to guide us. And that is exactly what the anatomic diagnostic protocol is for.
The ADP is really the backbone of our whole investigation. Seriously, think of it as your roadmap. It starts with the basics and then guides you to systematically check for and treat the most likely causes, one by one. Let's walk through what that looks like. So the protocol always begins with the fundamentals: a really good history, a physical exam, and a chest x-ray. At this stage, you're also checking for those red flags we just talked about and looking for medications like ACE inhibitors. From there, it's a logical sequence. We target the most common cause first, UACS. If that doesn't work, we move on to GERD, and then finally, we investigate for asthma or NAAB. This table breaks down how we actually confirm our suspicions. So for cough variant asthma, for example, we'd use spirometry and a methacholine challenge. Now here's a huge pearl for GERD. Up to half of patients won't have any of the classic heartburn symptoms, which is why we sometimes need to do pH monitoring. And for NAEB, the key is finding those eosinophils in the sputum without the airway hyperreactivity that you'd see in classic asthma.
Okay, so we figured out the likely cause. Now for the fun part. What are we going to do about it? Let's get into the specific management strategies, covering both lifestyle changes and the targeted medications for each of the main conditions. Before we even think about writing a prescription, these non-drug interventions are the foundation. Smoking cessation, absolutely non-negotiable. For GERD, simple things like elevating the head of the bed can make a huge difference. And for patients whose cough is coming from chronic rhinosinusitis, large volume saline irrigation is a key recommendation.
For upper airway cough syndrome, you have to remember that one size does not fit all. The treatment has to be tailored to the specific cause, so the way you treat allergic rhinitis is very different from how you treat chronic sinusitis. If you're not sure what the cause is, the standard empiric trial is a first-generation antihistamine plus a decongestant.
And right here, this is a major pearl for your PEBC exam. You have to know this. So why are older antihistamines like chlorpheniramine better in this specific situation? Well, it's not just about blocking histamine. It's their anticholinergic properties that really help to dry up all those secretions. Plus, the sedative effect can help break the cough cycle, which is especially useful at night. This table is a great little summary of your first-line drug therapies. For GERD, you've got to give that acid suppression trial enough time to work. We're talking at least 2 to 3 months. For any EBB, that eosinophilic inflammation is very responsive to inhaled corticosteroids. And for an ACE inhibitor-induced cough, the only real treatment is to stop the drug and switch to an ARB. Simple as that. So we followed the protocol, we've tried the standard treatments, but the patient is still coughing. I'm sure you can picture this scenario. It's frustrating for everyone, and it brings us to how we manage refractory or unexplained chronic cough.
The way we think about these really difficult cases now is this concept of cough hypersensitivity syndrome. The idea is basically that the body's entire cough reflex has gone haywire. The nerve receptors in the airways get hypersensitive, and the brain starts overreacting to signals. This means that things that shouldn't cause a cough, like cold air or even just talking, can trigger a massive coughing fit. So, if the problem is neurologic, it makes sense to use a neuromodulator. And the guideline recommended option here is gabapentin. Now, as pharmacists, it is crucial that you know how to counsel patients on this titration schedule. You have to start low and go slow. Start at 300 milligrams daily and then gradually increase it, aiming for up to 900 milligrams twice a day. You're trying to find that sweet spot between efficacy and side effects. And it's not meant to be a lifelong drug. You have to reassess after 6 months.
This comparison really shows you why gabapentin is the preferred choice. Yeah, other neuromodulators like pregabalin and even low-dose morphine can work, but they just come with more baggage. Pregabalin tends to have more side effects and a higher abuse potential. And morphine, well, it carries all the risks of tolerance and dependence, making it an option of last resort.
Okay, let's shift gears and talk about management in special populations. When you're treating chronic cough during pregnancy and breastfeeding, there's this whole other layer of complexity, right? You're always trying to balance treating the mom with keeping the baby safe. So let's just pause and think about this for a second. How does the actual state of being pregnant influence the very conditions that we know cause chronic cough in the first place? Well, pregnancy can really pour fuel on the fire for the big three. GERD gets worse because of hormonal changes and just the physical pressure from the growing uterus. Asthma and rhinitis can also flare up pretty significantly. The good news is our diagnostic approach doesn't really change. The key difference is being very careful about which medications we choose. This table is a critical one to know for your exam. For GERD, we start with lifestyle, then antacids, H2 blockers, and even PPIs, which actually have pretty reassuring safety data now. For asthma, inhaled corticosteroids like budesonide are preferred because they have the most safety data. And here's the key point for UACs. While we do use those first-gen antihistamines, oral decongestants like pseudoephedrine are a no-go in the first trimester. All right, we're in the home stretch. To wrap this all up, let's boil down the most critical information into a few high-yield therapeutic pearls. These are the facts you want to have ready to go for the PEBC exam. Okay, remember these points. First, and this is huge, up to a quarter of patients have more than one cause for their cough, so always keep that in mind. Second, know what doesn't work. Mucolytics have no proven role here. Be aware of some of the less common causes, like obstructive sleep apnea, where CPAP can actually cure the cough. And finally, remember that psychogenic cough is extremely rare, and for those UCC treatments like gabapentin, you always need a plan to reevaluate and try to taper off. And I'll leave you with this final clinical scenario to really test your understanding. So you have a patient with confirmed GERD. You've treated them with a high-dose PPI for 3 months, but the cough is only partially better. What do you do next? Well, the most logical next step, according to the anatomic diagnostic protocol, is to start investigating for a second coexisting cause. That partial response is a massive clue that there's probably something else going on, like UACS or asthma, that now needs its own investigation and treatment.